country needs you. We're going to talk about the remilitarization of Britain now, because America has kind of abandoned Europe. You can kind of understand why. I mean, to be honest, America having military control over the West suited America for a long time. Even though they put in the majority of the funding for the military, they reaped lots of benefits in trade and also being the reserve currency of the world and just being the daddy. Who doesn't want to be the daddy? I don't like Trump. Trump doesn't want to be the emperor of the world anymore. I don't get it. You'd think he would after all the things I've read about him. But yeah, so. We're now going to have to stand on our own feet. Keir is talking about boots on the ground in Ukraine. He's scaled that back to air and sea protection.
Is that because the army got on the phone and said, what boots? What are you talking about?
Well, what is it? Dannant turned around and said, if you want 5,000, you really need 25,000 because you've got to have rotations.
Yeah.
Where are you going to get 25,000 from? And someone said, okay, they're coming across on the channel every week. We've got a few there.
Well, yeah, no.
Funnily enough, I read a headline in a German paper that said that they're looking at that. They're looking at conscripting illegal migrants, but then you're going to, or I think it was specifically Afghanistani men, which you think, that's a good, that's a good thing to do. It'll get them to show their allegiance to the country and stuff. Yeah. Really, what you're doing is training them up and giving them weapons. Yeah. So isn't that great an idea?
But that's what the Americans did when they went in to take on the communists. We gave them the weapons, and then came Al Qaeda.
Yeah, and you see that across the Middle East. In Syria, you're seeing American weapons being used on both sides because various parts of the American state has funded and armed different factions at different times, and it always seems to
get to Syria now, and there's a little marketplace going American guns, American guns, Russian guns.
Unironically is though. That's the problem.
Yeah, but given the culture that we've got and what's happened in the UK over the past few decades, we're talking about it in the last section. We've got this culture of patriotism is essentially criminalized. Who's gonna? And we've had hundreds of thousands of people come into the country. We're having 1 million people, over 1 million gross migration every year. Net migration is still really high, like 700,000 as people leave. The British dream is now to get rich enough to be able to leave Britain. But we're having people coming across the border. So who's going to leave Britain and leave their wife and kids unprotected and defenceless in the UK, and then go overseas, get your legs blown off, and then come back to the UK and then get locked up by Keir Starmer because you asked, who raped my family? You know what I mean? That's literally,
or be charged for actually trying to shoot someone on the other side.
Yeah, or that's what they're doing. They're removing the sort of suspension of prosecution for SES troops.
Really?
So if you go serve overseas, you can be prosecuted for you're
shooting the enemy.
You can have some lefty human rights lawyer pick over what you did overseas when you're defending your country.
We saw what they did in Northern Ireland. We've seen the cases. Yes,
Yeah.
I mean, I campaigned, I think, way back in 2019 about one of the officers who'd been charged 8 times on abuses that allegedly occurred in Iraq and Iran. And each time he'd won, they kept on coming back for him. So what did they want? And that's it. And all of this on human rights issues. Yeah. So on the one side, you've got them improving the human rights issues for them, but actually means challenging soldiers when they come back. Yeah. And on the other side, you're going to go away, as you say, and get your legs blown off, but not protect you. And if you complain, throw you in prison. Yeah. The issue is very clearly, and why they want to have conscription here is because they recognize that the country has descended in such a way where if you challenge immigration, if you watch what's going on, and you've demonized white people in particular, why would you want to defend yourself? And let's say it is Russia. I've heard many arguments saying, well, hang on a minute, Russia wants to close its borders to illegal migration. It protects its Christian Judeo history. It wants to protect all its institutions. And we're living in a country that doesn't want to do all of that. Well, would my life be that different under them if I'm poor and working class? Because my voice would actually be heard, whereas here it wouldn't.
I mean, Russia's a sort of degenerate mass migration, WEF, like ultimate weapon.
It's a corrupt mafia state.
China, if China invaded, they're a nationalistic. The nationalists in Russia actually fight on the side of Ukraine because they hate Putin. They hate what's being done to the country. They hate
it's a federation, isn't it?
Yeah.
Multi-ethnic federation.
Yeah,
it's like a kind of Slavic EU.
Yeah, but China. I mean, you've got to look at China. All right, they've got censorship. Do we not have censorship in the UK?
Yeah, exactly.
We've got ridiculous levels of censorship in the UK. And also, the thing about China is, what you can and can't say.
I don't
Whereas
have any
you can
criticism
walk
of
around-
Xi Jinping.
You don't know what you're going to get a knock on the door from the
Yeah.
police about, who come round and say, "Oh yeah, we've got freedom of speech," but
And then you
posted
get
this
hit by
valid
a
opinion.
non-crime hate incident. Even if you didn't know what you said, someone from Scotland has turned around and said, "You mank, I don't like what you have to say on the show today," and suddenly the police have got you as a non-crime hate incident.
Yeah.
And this is really the dilemma that we've got as a country. They have demonized our nation. They've demonized our history. They've helping to destroy our culture. They're pulling down statues. They've got TV shows that were going on which criticize white children in a minute, when actually we see the opposite. And then they expect you to go and fight for something that is not representative of them anymore.
And
I
all the
wouldn't
time-
let my sons fight for this.
No.
all the time you got guys like this coming over. So this guy came over a couple of weeks ago. So he's a gun-toting channel migrant who called for the slaughter of all Jews. And he'll have, human rights lawyers provided by the state to protect his rights. And so what we're supposed to leave the country while he's in the country so we can go and, it doesn't make any sense. I think, if anything, Ukraine shows that a country, Ukraine's a fiercely sort of nationalistic, masculinist country that protects its borders. It's got inviolable borders, so it doesn't allow bollocks like this. And if we move on to the next one, and we've got 40 to 50,000. This is from a few years ago, so the number is going to be greater now. Within our borders, 40 to 50,000 Islamists on terror watch lists. I mean,
Why are they here?
that's an army. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, that's absolutely
It is.
Why are they here?
And all they have to do is coagulate together in one particular area and
Good
cause
thing-
that slow kind of destruction, where we have even professors of well-recognized professors at London University suggesting we're getting close to a civil war, low-level hits.
That's an amazing thing, by the way. David Betts.
Yeah,
And if you've read it
yeah.
at great length, as I have, it makes the analysis of what I looked when I went back to the north of England, in Manchester, where I was, and you look in Leeds and Birmingham and those areas, where you go to places now which are predominantly poor Muslim individuals who come from different countries, but also second and third generation Pakistanis who are without work, who have that same level of no hope in there. And they're voting for the Islamist parties, and they're going to be there radicalized in the same way that we could see in Syria. It might not happen next year or the year after, but we are building this kind of tortured country of the future.
The best Britain can really hope for is a sort of balkanization and separate states forming within Britain. But the worst we're going to get is all-out civil war.
I wonder, and I'm just throwing this out because I was just thinking about it in the car coming over. Do you think the idea of having Starmer trying to make himself look like some sort of Joe 90 out there, look at me in my padded gear out there, is the hope that by having a war against Russia, enough of us will die that we'll all get the kind of 1939 spirit together? Do you think that's what really the elites are hoping might actually happen?
I'm not sure. I think the elites are just spitballing and reacting to situations. I think the fact that our economy has been a sort of Ponzi scheme for so long, and they've tried to keep it going instead of doing the necessary thing, which is to cut welfare spending, cut pensions, make people work longer. That's essentially what we need to do.
It's the only thing to do.
It's the only thing to do, but obviously that's an incredibly unpopular message to put out. So if you only need to last another 4 years in office, you're not going to do that. Instead, you're going to bring in more mass migration that's going to artificially inflate GDP. It's like throwing kindling on a fire, but you're actually making the long-term structural issues worse.
One of the structural issues is, if you are really radical, is you have to close the borders completely. When I wrote the paper, A Fair, Flexible, Forward-Thinking Immigration paper, I showed that it was possible to run our National Health Service education with 50,000 net migration a year, and that meant banning low-skilled immigration. And it did mean that there would be a small hit to GDP in the first couple of years.
no, not
because
the
there had to be,
GDP.
exactly.
Oh,
the
no.
Holy grail.
God, yeah.
But when we've got GNP per capita now declining rapidly, like every year now we're worse off than the year before, that change then, that radical change, would have left 1 million people not here in this country, therefore no demand for the housing, therefore no demand for the benefits,
All of
therefore
the
no
problems
demand
are
for the NHS.
overpopulation.
All of them move away. And if you can remove that body and then start deporting, if it is 1 million people, 1 million people gone from this country who are a cost to the country, would actually start to look at us saying, okay, we still got those massive issues of debt, huge amounts of debt, but at least now the money that's coming in, perhaps we can spread that more evenly. It's a good start, but will we have politicians in our elites willing to take those radicals? No, I'll take it off the disabled and I'll make the pensioners freeze to death. That's it.
Yeah.
Take the land off the farmers.
Yeah, which is what communists always do.
He has middle-class schools. Sorry, go on, carry on. There's just so many things Keir Starmer has done that are just
we've already covered some of this in the discussion we've had, but the next tab shows so this is Matt Goodwin's analysis. So as of about getting on for a month ago, 154,000 mainly young men from Islamic nations have entered Britain illegally. So yeah, and we saw during the Southport riots, I was just talking to one of the guys in the office, and he reminded me that they had the police were saying to the Muslim mobs, leave your weapons in the mosque.
Yes.
And it's like, man, how about they don't leave the, how come, why don't you have some sort of amnesty where they hand in the weapons? Wouldn't that be more reassuring?
No, we're going to turn the mosques into armories.
Yeah.
Like to literal arsenals.
Don't get on non-crime hate incidents.
Well, I mean, it was the police doing that, not me.
Well, that's the thing. The culture has changed. The politics have changed. The next tab shows, look at this news story. So, vile neo-Nazi group spreads sick campaign of hate to Scotland's highest peak. If we scroll down, let's see what the sick campaign of hate. It's a sticker saying "Love Your Nation." I'm sure they had other stickers saying other stuff, but this is the sticker. This is the headline thing that's apparently so hateful. Yeah. So, apparently saying "Love Your Nation" is a hate crime. Yes. So how am I supposed? So what am I fighting for? People don't join the army for money.
And that's a valid.
I have an answer to
really,
this.
When you think about it.
You are fighting for the liberal international order. You are fighting.
Oh, thanks.
Exactly. But that's what they're all think. That's what they all think they're protecting, right? Yeah. So everyone is treated as the same. So I mean, people who literally get off the boat, they need all of these extra rights. They need all of these extra protections because they don't have a society around them that will naturally accommodate them. Right. So if you go back to Scotland, you've got friends and family who will help you if you're in trouble. Right. Yeah, really. These people. Well, maybe you don't.
I like the phrase "liberal international order," shortened Leo.
That's true. but that's what they're protecting. And so if you love your nation, well, what does that put in self-opposition to? Right, yeah. Well, the liberal international order, the rules-based order, is in trouble. And frankly, Donald Trump is the reason they think Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin are the same person is because they're both the kind of man who don't agree with the international rules-based order.
And I'd fight for the liberal international rules-based order if it was what it said it was. But
it was racist.
Not. It's this crappy sort of soft communism. Not even a soft communism. You know what I mean?
It's just not acceptable.
Yeah.
The international rule-based order has been perverted from the really laudable ideas of having a UN Convention on Human Rights and that dealt with those people in war in the Second World War with Jews being persecuted. What they didn't say is, by the way, we're going to allow that to be extended to allow anyone who's just in any country in the world that feels that they really don't want to work there.
There'll be refugees from poverty.
Yeah. I've got one. When I do the research on asylum, that shows that in the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, we had 1,200,000 people have come here since the year 2000 who've made claims for asylum. And my favourite is the one from Svalbard,
the seed depository.
Yeah, in Svalbard, just outside of Norway.
Yeah, the Norwegian island.
Claim asylum.
Well, I don't know. I think maybe he just said it's too cold, or maybe there's a polar bear that comes as a friend of him and he didn't want to get involved. But that's it. And the other one was that in the last year of Biden and Trump, it was 76 Americans under Biden had sought asylum over here, but 89 from under Trump in his last year. So even Trump beat Biden then.
And they get asylum based on that.
Well, the research we've got doesn't allow us, and because the freedom of information requests have failed, they don't allow us to say the applications, who's actually been rejected, who's actually been allowed in. They give you the numbers of who come, the children, all the rest of it. Yeah. They give you the numbers of the claimants and who's been accepted, but they don't allow you to match across. Yeah. And that's one way of hiding information.
And the whole asylum system is essentially a sort of anti-civilizational immigration system. I mean, most people claiming asylum aren't actually fleeing war. They might be fleeing,
Often they're fleeing popular tourist destinations like Thailand.
Right? And they return there. Most of them return there on holiday, return to where they're fleeing. So, it can't be that bad.
Quid pro quo where the 69 people from Jamaica last year left, that with 69 of us can go back and take over their holiday homes.
Let's move on.
Okay, and if we're still looking at
before we reconstruct the British Empire,
which would be a good idea. Honestly,
that would be a good idea. I
if we had a
agree.
British Empire running these places, they wouldn't need to seek
Don't put a
asylum
sticker,
here.
love your British Empire.
Well, this is the thing. There was like, well, we want to solve migration at the source. And it's like,
Yeah.
so that's imperialism.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, okay,
Which is a great idea.
we can have a conversation about it if you want.
Yeah. We can turn Somalia into a productive, industrialized country. If we look here, so this is Emily Thornberry, who's still a bigwig in the Labour Party.
Yes.
We scroll down, we can see her sneering at the England flag.
Rochester.
Yeah,
I think
be Rochester.
she's not even Scottish. She's sneering at an England flag, and she's English. I mean, that just shows,
image
sort
from
of-
Rochester.
Yeah, it
How
was.
dare they?
that shows the sort of how the elites see any form of nationalism
Anti-nativists,
or
yeah.
patriotism. It's disgusting. And now those people who love their country are going to be the people. All of a sudden, you won't see people sneering at patriotism. They're going to
No.
go, "Why aren't you patriotic?" I've seen that. I've seen Dale Vince saying, "Oh, you should be patriotic and pay more tax." It's like, I prefer to show my patriotism in a different way than. But yeah, and it's cultural as well. They're removing World War II murals because they show too many white people.
In
They
Britain,
were white at the time.
Yeah.
That's right. They were the white people who died for the freedom of this country.
in 1961, England was something like 99% English, so white.
And something like they did studies. I mean, this is
Sorry,
we can play that. No, move on to that next one. We can play this if you like, but it's basically just English people.
Are you proud to be British? Oh God, no. Oh, good God, no. No, I hate England. This place sucks.
Yeah, nah, not really actually, no.
No, there's a horrible history behind it.
I see all in it, I don't like it.
The weather's awful. The job market's terrible. We get paid terribly. And our accents can be annoying. Like Mancunians, Liverpool, A-OK. Southern accent does my head in. No offence.
I like where I live. I wouldn't say I'm proud of
some
Britain
of
as a
that's
whole,
really
but
We're the most obnoxious when it comes to holidays, and
oh God, I can't stand to see
Yeah,
it.
some of that they are making some really good points there. But,
What's that about Mancunians?
Yeah, definitely not about the Mancunian accents compared to the Southern accents.
But yeah, you can see this sort of messaging that starts in primary school, and then Britain's terrible, we've got horrible history. We're the worst country in the world. We did so many cruel things. It's like, no, we didn't. As empires go, we were one of the most benevolent, best empires. If you could have an empire come in, I don't think since the Roman Empire as a
Built so many things.
built so much stuff, and let
Do you
people
like the
keep their
Genghis
property.
Khan Empire? Genghis, he was a lovely man, wasn't he? He just threw you into a pit with spikes.
Do you want the Arab Empire where they castrated the slaves? You know what I mean? Like people. It was the old days. People were pretty barbaric.
Machu Picchu.
You don't even need to go that far back. You look at the Spanish, man. The Spanish were amazingly evil. Like everywhere they went. Like when Columbus arrives in Cuba or whatever it was, he just, I need 50 men to enslave the island. What? We don't do that.
Yeah.
Like, in fact, that was kind of uniquely Spanish, actually. But it's this constant, like, just rapacious advance that the Spanish have, where the British are like, right, we're going to build something here, we're going to build something here, we're going to build something here. Here's the rule
Belgians
of
in
law.
Congo.
God, yeah,
The Chinese with their own empires, as
the
they're doing
Japanese.
the 500 nations, they're bringing all the city-states in together. All along that period is equally murderous along the way. And I'm not saying we didn't do anything bad along the route, but we brought a best out of people. We tried to bring in leaders. We expanded the civil service. We granted opportunities for work.
And we left most states in a better state than when we got there. And although later on, they might have fallen apart. I mean, look at what's happened in Zimbabwe. You can't really blame that on Britain. You know what I mean? Britain's provided any assistance it can to stop it happening. But it's inevitable in some cases. And it's interesting you mentioned China because right now they're the rapacious colonial empire, and you never see these anti-colonial Brits talking about that.
It's not about that. It's about hatred. It's about hatred of Britain.
Yeah,
It's about, honestly, it's about communist subversion and demoralization.
It's the straight out of the Red Book. It's straight out.
100%. And it's been done by people who are communists. So,
Yeah.
anyway.
And Reform were banned from laying a wreath on Remembrance Day, and there's been this huge push for DEI in the military, as there has across all government organisations and private sector organisations. So white British students not allowed to apply for security services internship, which is ridiculous. I used to work for Detica, which and then BAE Systems, Applied Intelligence, that did a lot of intelligence work, military stuff and all the rest of it. And we had a really sort of genuinely diverse workforce because they were trying to get the best, and to shut out white people from intelligence roles. That's like,
Well, Well, it's illegal. I mean, it's actively illegal.
Maybe. Yeah, it's illegal. And also, like,
Not
man,
that matters, you know.
if you're going to pick a demographic, pick stupid people. How about that? You know what I mean? I don't know.
I do see there's a 10 to 11 week course there that's for those of ethnic minority and from a socially economic disadvantaged background. Obviously, as a Mancunian accent that I once had, that disadvantage, I should be able to go straight away, and I'll see if the MI5 will take me. I doubt very much, because I believe in right-wing conservative.
Well, yeah, you're definitely not someone who gets human
probably
rights.
on the list.
You definitely will be.
And all the recruitment ads for the military were the usual sort of DEI slang.
Play with you.
So this basically has a British soldier stopping to pray
Ramadan
for whatever it is.
whatever Muslims do, but not representative of the Muslim experience of the British Army, though, is it?
No.
That's the thing. Like, for anyone who doesn't know, more Muslims joined ISIS than the British.
I was just going to say.
Whilst he's doing that, and everybody else can actually, he's holding his hand up saying, "You wait there, because someone might just shoot him any moment." To be honest, because whilst we're keeping quiet, not watching the enemy, that's what's happening.
But that's the thing. Like, him doing this is more important than everyone else's priority.
Yeah, everyone else is
doing
safe.
the job. Yeah, exactly. You know, it's like, no, you can't have that.
Yeah.
Seriously, he could have been shot by anyone watching there going, hang on, look, they're all stopping for, Ramadan.
Yeah.
The British guys are going to stop and have a Morris dance, while they're, being spotted by a Reaper drone. It's nonsense. And interestingly, so the claim that more British Muslims fought for ISIS than fought in the British military was fact-checked by The Guardian, who said it's not true because many of the British Muslims who fought for ISIS have returned home to Britain. Oh, well, that's
Checkmate, Donald Trump.
That's it. So because they didn't go actually back to Afghanistan, they're therefore okay. They're one of us.
Yeah, they're on rotation at the moment.
I'm so glad they're home. I was worried about their safety. God damn it, man.
Absolutely mental. And the government is punishing the military and taking away perks. I mean, you were talking before about how the SAS aren't, they're running the risk of prosecution for activities on the battlefield. They're losing these tax perks, so they get this pension death tax as well. I mean, obviously, one of the things, because soldiers aren't paid a lot compared to most people, especially considering the sort of level of commitment and risk and stuff like that. So people aren't doing it for the money, but at least for the small amount of money they're getting, don't take perks away from them. It's ridiculous. So basically, off-duty deaths in service will be subject to inheritance tax as children or partners of unmarried servicemen face charges. And also, military servicemen were discharged in America and chastised or disciplined in Britain for not having the COVID vaccine. I'm not sure. So they're still reviewing possible discipline of troops, it says there. And the people who might fight the hardest, who might be willing to go to Ukraine, because I know people in the military who basically just want to fight. And they joined up to fight. And
why else would you join them?
And this is how a veteran was treated by his government, by the British government. So he expressed, this is after the Southport attacks, where obviously these little girls were stabbed by a second generation migrant, or if you're the mass media, 100% British Welsh Christian choir boy. So this guy just posted a video that was completely valid. All the opinions he expressed were valid. He was specifically peaceful. He said, don't do anything violent, but these are some questions we need to ask and all this sort of stuff. And I watched it. I was like, it was actually very reasoned considering, what had just happened.
Absolutely.
And he was prosecuted by the state. So many people who were prosecuted just were told, I don't know if there was collusion going on between duty solicitors and magistrates and courts and the government, but so many people just pleaded guilty, and were obviously promised, you get a lighter sentence, and also, if you plead not guilty, you'll be held on remand, so it's basically the same thing. And then they got ridiculously long sentences, like Lucy Connolly, who's a young mother, for a tweet that didn't have any real world impact. She got like 30 odd months in prison. It's disgusting. And she'd already lost a child to sort of negligent immigrant doctor. So you can understand why she might have an issue around this. So he was one of the few that pleaded not guilty, and it sort of shows it casts a question mark over the rest of the convictions, because he was cleared in 17 minutes by a jury. So no wonder. But what a way to treat a veteran. You know what I mean? So soldiers are quitting in thousands. There are
It won't be just because of pay. It's all the things that we're
That's the
talking
way
about.
they're being
absolutely.
treated.
It's the desire that if we go to fight, then we might get caught, as we've talked about.
Yeah.
We have our rights removed. And what am I fighting for? And I'm certainly not going to leave my children here.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's a really superbly valid point.
Yeah, why would you defend the borders of another country when we're not defending the borders of our own country? And I think,
That argument
Ukraine
is not going to go away easily.
Yeah, Ukraine and Poland, they're showing, how you defend borders.
Yes.
You have borders and you resolutely defend them.
And Britain is just not a safe country anymore. Like
Yeah.
there's the kind of psychic landscape that, people of our sort of age, we remember what it was like when we were sort of 20 years old. And you just go out on a Friday night, you just go get absolutely pissed, and you would stagger home, a mile or two, and nothing would happen, and you would never expect anything to happen. I wouldn't do that now. I would think, Jesus Christ, not with the people wandering around there.
Yeah.
It's dangerous now. I'm not leaving my family
different
here
level of
without me
danger.
to help them.
You knew the fights when you saw them in the pubs and the bars,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
the
They were
people
personal.
weren't waiting in corners, waiting for you to come home to rob you or steal from you.
Yeah.
In the same way that we're seeing now.
And the sort of predatory element, like the Somalian guy who he raped a woman to death on a park bench. And, basically, if you want to protect your family, you got to stay in the UK. You got to stay near your family. It's ridiculous. And British youth don't want to fight anyway. We've got this next clip.
Yeah.
Would you
I've
believe,
seen
looking
this
at them, that they don't want to fight? Because we've also, alongside this sort of, our patriotism turning into a hate crime, any sort of nationalism being a hate crime, we've also had a sort of pussification of our society.
Yes.
Where, young men aren't taught to be masculine unless it's by Andrew Tate. Everybody's just trying to turn them into the weakest gimps in the
Should we
world.
watch this?
It's just the comment on the right.
Would you fight for the country?
No.
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 You got your citizenship, so you're
But
not.
I'm not fighting.
I have no ounce of patriotism in my body whatsoever.
Really?
No.
I just can't be bothered.
No, can't be bothered. Okay.
But also, we're all trans, so that's a hot topic, isn't it?
How does being trans come into the conversation?
I think, especially in America, they've just outlawed trans people joining the military. So I don't know what that situation means for us in the future, but I can't wear this to the bloody. Imagine me in the barracks, no, it's not happening.
The last thing.
Jesus Christ, sick of
Don't worry,
hearing.
no one will touch you.
Yeah. sick of hearing from them.
Just call me old-fashioned.
I just want Cromwell to take over. That's all I want. Just.
And also, so that's a sort of, I guess, native British population, but we've also got an issue with the immigrants not seeing themselves as British first. And this isn't. I'm not making a sweeping generalization here. I know black guys who served in the military who see themselves as completely British and way more patriotic and British than a lot of white people.
Well, apparently
the
by
people
those people
we've just seen. But there are trends with people who have come from overseas or have their origin from overseas who don't see their heart and soul
It's a
with
different
the flag.
generation. It's what they didn't see was what happened in the Second World War. There isn't the cultural links together. And I think when you remove the cultural connectivity, we're not like the Roman army where they gave you citizenship as long as you fought for a long time. I know the European Union wanted to try and create that ideology, but we're way away from that now.
Yeah.
the thing is as well, what you're thinking of, Leo, is older gentlemen, right? Who grew up in a country that wasn't ruled under the doctrine of multiculturalism, right? Because everything about a culture that is self-confident and monocultural is about integration, and it genuinely is. I mean, notice we never have the conversation about integration anymore. How are these people? What do you mean integrating? They have their own little ethnic enclave, and that's how things are. And so you've essentially said there is no country. What there are these privileged little groups who have their own almost little sovereignties. Well, why would I fight for this? Of course you're not going to fight for this. Whereas if you grew up in a monocultural society, all the aspects of society were geared to making you join it. You didn't have the option of just sitting outside of it and having your own little colony. And it's completely self-evident.
I think you look at that Roman analogy again. As Rome fell away, you broke down into smaller communities.
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening as the British Empire is going away. The nation of Britain is going away. We're now slipping into little kind of enclaves once more. And what are you going to wait for? Wait for a King Alfred to come along one day and say we can bring us all together again? I just don't think that's going to happen in the short term.
Maybe not in the short term, but I would like another King Alfred.
Yeah.
That sounds like a great idea. But anyway,
Running low of time, should I?
you know what? We'll carry on. So I'll save the third segment for Monday.
All right, cool.
It's fine.
So we've moved on to the next thing. So this is in they asked a bunch of migrants in Sweden if they would defend Sweden. This isn't a video you can play, unfortunately. It's just
That's
a
all right.
screenshot.
But I can guess what their responses
But
were.
the answer was no, and I've seen similar surveys and stuff saying, people saying they don't identify as British, and also a huge proportion of British Muslims see themselves as Muslim first and British second, way higher than in France and Germany and other European countries. So we've got issues. We've got issues in Britain. Britain likes to pretend that we've done multiculturalism, we've done integration in a different way, and it's better. It absolutely is not. And like you say, this whole idea of integration. There isn't, in a lot of places, there isn't a British society for people to integrate into. So they're born into, even, second, third, fourth generation migrants are born into a foreign culture within this country.
The only integration that occurs is when you've been to university and have got real wealth.
Yeah.
So you integrate now because my friend was at university, they're a Muslim, they're a doctor. Or they're, from Somalia and they're a lawyer.
Yeah.
But we're all making 100, 150 grand, 200 grand a year, and we can all live in Surrey, or we've got a nice little apartment in this part of Canary Wharf. We're a multicultural mix of wealth based on that level of culture. But that's our pod.
Yeah.
That's our little pod that we're in. We don't see those elsewhere in the country because we've just become like any other upper middle class group or middle class group across the world. We're the internationalists, and we don't really care about this lot.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that's why there's such scorn and disdain for when the Southport riots happened. People were like, "Oh my God, why aren't you?" Because they're not
white working class.
They're,
oh
they're
my
not
God!
understanding. This isn't the same as Tez from the tennis club. This is the group.
And this goes back to our first argument. Rupert gets that. Nigel doesn't.
Right.
And the whole way that immigration has been done in this country has just been openly destructive as well. The idea that someone can we'll rubber stamp your visa, you can just come and live in England. It's like, okay, but what? Just it's just completely free, is it? Because you know what you're going to get from that. Because I mean, if the Chinese said, right, okay, Europeans, come on over to China, right? We're gonna make sure that the laws favor you. We're gonna make sure the media favors you. We're gonna make sure that you're advanced through DEI schemes, through all of the institutions, and you can just do whatever you want. We're gonna give you Chinese money. You'd be like, okay, well, this is crazy, but I'm up for it because why wouldn't I take advantage of this? But what are you gonna get, right? Are you gonna get this sort of weird, sort of Gestalt European area, or are you going to get the English area, the French area, the German area, the Irish area? You're going to get these little ethnic enclaves from Europeans in China because it's just easier. It's just easier to live around people that have a familiar pattern of life. You share a language, you share expectations.
Where did that happen? In a proper real time? The United States.
Yes.
Because everybody fled Europe. They went to different parts of the United States where their community were.
But what's interesting is that in I think it's the early 19th century in the United States, they were becoming aware that parts, like, there are so many Germans that actually we have to start aggressively asserting the Anglo culture of the United States. No, they did. They literally aggressively asserted at the state level, saying, no, you are not allowed to speak German. So this is why, like, Donald Trump is not Drumpf, right? So immigrants to the United States would anglicize their names. They'd be like, oh yeah, no, I'm going to take on an English sounding name so people will accept me and I'll fit in. And this is how integration actually works. Yeah. We have done nothing of that. I mean, like, there are stories of people in the early 20th century who's like, yeah, well, when my parents came over from Poland, we were forbidden from speaking Polish in the house, right? We had to speak English because we wanted to integrate. We wanted to fit in. Like, that's what you would have to do if you wanted integration, and we've done nothing.
We do the opposite. We encourage
do the opposite.
People to keep their own language, and we provide
Here's a translator.
interpreters.
Yeah. It's like it was deliberately designed to destroy the country, destroy the solidarity of the country, and leave us with areas of the country that are frankly not English, not Welsh, not Scottish. And why are they surprised that nobody wants to fight for this?
And this is the shock. Them.
All
I think they're finding this now going, oh, we didn't really think this would happen.
You ask your client groups that you've brought over and given them all of our money and all of the grace of the state, the laws and everything, all of that's in their favor. You ask them to fight for this, and they're like, we're not fighting for this. Why would we fight for this?
Well, yeah, and if we move on to the next little video, so talking to a friend from Ukraine, he was saying, so this is we can play this without the sound. This is when the Russian invasion first kicked off. Migrants to Ukraine, because there were a few, were trying to leave on the trains and sort of blocking, some of them are blocking the women and children from the trains. And this was reported in The Guardian and stuff. This is racist. They're dragging the Africans and the black people off of buses, dragging African men off of buses. And also, you know what I mean? Why, like, we're told that when people come to a country, they're 100% British as soon as they step foot in the soil. So why are they leaving instead of fighting?
Why are these Ukrainian men fleeing? Yeah.
Why are the Ukrainian men having to spill their blood, whereas the immigrants have enjoyed the benefits of the culture and the country that Ukrainian men and women created can flee? It's nonsense. Are we going to see that in the UK? It's
so.
Yeah.
You absolutely. If there was a war that broke out in the UK, it would be the quickest way of draining the excess immigrant population.
I was going to say that's the counterfactual, isn't it? Let's start a war just so we can get rid of them.
Yeah, the idea that people coming across the border are going to be prepared to fight for this country is pretty ridiculous. I mean, they weren't. The whole point of an asylum seeker is they weren't prepared to fight for their own country. And in fact, just on that, I actually loathe the idea that we can take healthy adult men as asylum seekers. It's like the idea is just like, no, that should just not be an asylum seeker. No, you're old enough to fight and join your country's army. Get over there. We'll send you money. We'll give you guns. I don't know. We'll help them, right? Yeah. I'm happy to help them. But no, you're not an asylum seeker. You're a coward. And if it was just women coming across on the boats, nobody would mind.
No, they would. The old joke being the women would form SS squads overnight, right? they were like, absolutely not. Like, if my neighborhood was flooded with beautiful Ukrainian women, I think the wives of the neighborhood would be really upset about it.
And in fact, we could be fueling civil war with mass immigration, this constant, constant talking down of nativism and patriotism. I think this is what you're referring to earlier. So this is an article by David Betts, who's a professor of war in the modern world in the Department of War Studies, King's College London, where he heads the MA War Studies program. An incredible. I've been listening to his
been on a bunch of podcasts recently.
Louise Perry, the New Culture Forum, and this article in particular, Civil War Comes to the West, really interesting. So he basically warns that the shift from a homogenous society to heterogeneous or multicultural society is dangerous because you've got a native population that's increasingly aware that they're losing sort of majority status, they're being deranked, and so that's when you can get conflict. And obviously everything that the establishment is doing in terms of making it really obvious that there's two tiers, like the recent sentencing guidelines that said ethnic minority people get shorter sentences, get special treatment. Everything they do is really overt and is really antagonizing to the native population.
So just so the thing again, like going back to the China example, if China was like, Europeans, come on over, form your own little ethnic conflict. Can you imagine if the Chinese government was like, right, okay, you're going to get shorter sentences than native Chinese people? You'd be like, why are you doing this to yourselves?
Well, it's one of the weirdest concepts, but when you look at this and you can say you saw what happened in South Africa, where there was quite an element of white working class poverty, the Afrikaners in there. And they had to build their own enclaves to protect themselves as the very wealthy, rich white people started to either leave the country or leave them in the powers of those who we now know in charge of stealing farms, taking assets
actual
from them. And you have those enclaves still exist. We don't see that promoted too much on our televisions. We saw what happened in Zimbabwe. If you were white and poor there, you effectively left or you were killed. And so when David Betts talks about this, the situation is not like that now, but it's the way that it's developing. It's the pockets that are being created. And everything that we said about, mass immigration, if you don't allow integration, and that can only occur on smaller numbers, whilst you've got an economy that's growing. those things are coming to pass now. And you have academics like David Betts, he admits he's of the left.
Yeah.
You know, he's not a right wing.
Almost every academic is. Yeah.
And he is now warning this. And yet, are they beginning to pick this up at all? I don't know. But this is really an important piece of research that advances the arguments.
Yeah, and the conditions are ripe for civil war in the UK within the next decade, basically. So it's
this is why they're going so hard on young white men at the moment, right? This is why like you see them in Parliament. You see this adolescence thing where they're going at them and saying, "Well, look, why?" You know, and the way that they approach it as well, as if like. It's a bunch of menopausal women surrounding young man going, right, why aren't you acting like a young girl, basically? And it's like, look, you can, these young men don't know what to say to any of this because this is an alien environment. They don't know what's happening. But the sense that they are having their birthright stolen from them is perennial. It is inside of them and they don't know what to do. And this is what the establishment is currently most afraid of, that young white men are just like, you know what, we can actually cooperate.
Yeah.
If there's one thing that young white men have shown through the ages is that they can cooperate very, very successfully. And so if you're the HR ladies running Britain at the moment, you're like, so what? They might all just get together on social media or something. Like, yeah, they might actually. And you can see they're genuinely afraid of it. And it's things like this. David Betts, if I recall correctly, he says that the thing that's missing is essentially the leader to unite them together to actually start it. So, okay, but when someone says, okay, young white men, let's go. Let's do this. Yeah. Well, then it's on. And do we think that the multicultural establishment is actually going to be able to stop them? Do we think they're going to have the power?
Not without real violence, not without... And this is why you have organisations like Hope Not Hate that want to vilify them.
Even if they use real violence, I don't know that they can do it.
Well, I think if they use real violence, because I mean, during the Southport riots, I was wondering, how close are we to the military being called in? This looks like it's spiraling out of control, and the police won't be able to deal with it. They're not used. They're not designed to deal with that kind of level of mass disorder.
The 5'2" high vis wearing Indian ladies aren't going to deal with this.
In the rainbow painted police van.
Yeah.
But would the military, if they were called in, given that the majority of the military are patriotic and are kind of, I think a lot of them are kind of not happy with how the direction of travel in the country, would they acquiesce to turning their guns on their cousins and their neighbours?
Well, I'm intrigued about that because I look back, we were going to talk about the Peterloo Massacre, and the Peterloo Massacre had similar sort of things. You had the yeomen came in, and admittedly many of the yeomen were actually people who were reasonably wealthy, but they had a number of individuals who were quite willing to chop their own down just for the sake of a few coins. Now, the question is, would our own military this way do exactly the same as what you've seen in Ukraine in their own revolution? Would they shoot their own when the revolution is saying we're now being treated so unfairly? I mean, I'm mixed race. We've talked about this early on. And we I look at the white end of my family and saying, why should they feel so disenfranchised from this country? Whether I can put an application form for the same job and say, I'm mixed race and you're white. And you know that the mixed race element now is going to push you up the ladder much more than them. That sense of unfairness, I'm cut out of jobs, I'm cut out of education. Then on the other side, you're being told white masculinity, you're crazed, and you've got these TV shows, I know we're not going to do it today, all of them de-emasculating white individuals.
Young white men.
That is not right, and it's not on, quite frankly. It is quite evil.
If you look at the British media, it's sort of like Radio Rwanda against white people, but with sort of fewer checks and balances, and,
with less of a fair hearing on either side.
Because if you look at the reality, when you see who's doing the stabbing, when you see the picture of Axel Rudacabana, that 100% Welsh choir boy. It's a blatant thing. But then I think, some of it is so overt and so ridiculous. Once people acquiesce to something, once people go along with a ridiculous position, they'll defend that position. And, you're sort of creating a societal pressure to go along with that. You see with these people, saying, oh, I hate Britain, I hate Britain. They might not actually think that, but they've got to say it. And then once they've said it, they've got to defend it. But I think war might be a good thing for the UK, because it was H.L. Mencken who said, war is a good thing because it is honest, it admits the central fact of human nature. A nation too long at peace becomes a sort of gigantic old maid. And so
No, that's true. It's totally. And look
Well,
at
one
it.
of those videos we saw the young maids.
Yeah.
Exactly. But, like this thing with the TV show about the young men, like all it was like menopausal women sitting around talking to other menopausal women about what's going on with young men. It's like, okay, but you actually need to speak to people like us if you want to know, and because we know a lot of young men because they follow us, and they're like, why does everything suck now? It's like, yeah, no, we can explain it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
If you would like to watch the full uncut version that is also uncensored, head on over to lotuseaters.com to find out more.